Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Tales of the Darkness. Lower the lights. Stay where you are. If something in your house feels slightly off tonight, don't check it yet. Just listen. Story 1. The City That Watched Us Leave. My name is Daniel, and the first thing you need to know is that I didn't lose sleep because of what I saw down there. I lost sleep because it followed the timing of my thoughts afterward, like it learned when I was about to relax and used that moment to step closer. We were sent in because a patrol stopped responding without panic, without confusion, without that last broken transmission that at least proves someone is still alive. It was just silence where voices were supposed to be. And silence like that isn't empty, it's finished. The place had no name anyone used out loud, not anymore. It was just the city on the map people pointed at and then stopped pointing at. Buildings packed tight like they wanted to hide each other. Streets too clean of movement. Windows dark but not broken. And that was the first lie it told us, that nothing was happening. We moved the way we always moved, slow enough to notice changes, fast enough to not give the air time to settle around us. And at first, the only thing that felt wrong was how sound behaved, because footsteps didn't echo the way they should, and even our gear seemed quieter, like the ground was absorbing noise instead of returning it. I noticed it before anyone said anything. That sensation of being observed without a direction to look, not eyes on you, attention on you. The same feeling you get when you step into a room mid-conversation and you don't know why everyone got quiet, except here nobody was there to pretend. We found the building where the last signal came from, and nothing looked forced. No splintered doors, no shattered glass, no signs of a struggle. And that should have been a relief, but it tightened my chest instead, because when there's no damage, you start wondering what removed the need for damage. Inside, the light didn't spread correctly. It existed, but it didn't soften corners. It didn't reach into the edges. And our voices came back to us slightly delayed, like the room wanted to repeat them after tasting them first, and that delay kept getting more accurate the longer we stayed. We went lower because the building had a passage that didn't match the layout, a stairwell that should have ended and didn't, steps leading down into air that felt heavy, not cold, not hot. Heavy, like breathing, had to be measured, and every step down felt like the world above was becoming less real. Halfway down, I heard my name behind me in my own tone, not loud, not distorted, just normal enough that my body tried to respond before my mind caught up. And when I turned, there was nobody looking at me, nobody even facing my direction. And that was when I understood something important. Whatever was with us didn't need to show itself to use the right sound. At the bottom, the corridor opened into a space that looked prepared, not staged like a trap, prepared like an operating room. And the patrol was there, seated the way they would have been seated during a calm check-in, straps in place, gear on, posture intact, and that detail was worse than chaos because it meant nothing interrupted them. Something simply decided they were done. Their bodies looked wrong in a way that didn't match injury, not torn, not broken, just aged past the point of belonging, like time had been applied to them again and again while everything else stayed on schedule, and the smell wasn't fresh or sharp, it was old and patient, like the air had been holding it for a long time. Nobody spoke because speaking felt like permission, and the silence down there didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like something listening for the next sentence. And when one of us shifted his weight, the sound of it seemed to carry farther than it should have, like the room was measuring it. We backed out the way we came in, and the stairwell felt tighter on the way up, not physically smaller, mentally narrower. Like the idea of leaving was being resisted, and when we reached the door above ground, the city outside looked the same as before, but my body didn't accept it the same way because I could feel the place behind me, still paying attention. We left fast, faster than we should have, not running, just moving with that controlled urgency you use when you don't want to admit fear out loud. And as we pulled away, I had the clearest sense that the city wasn't watching with windows or rooftops. It was watching with silence, as if the absence of sound itself was a line of sight. That night, I didn't dream like normal. I didn't see scenes or images. I felt the timing return, that pause before sleep where your mind loosens its grip. And in that pause, I heard my own voice in the dark, finishing a thought I hadn't spoken, soft and calm like it was helping me settle, and the relief that followed made me nauseous, because relief meant I had accepted it for a second. Over the next days, it showed up in small ways that were easy to deny, a delayed echo of my own footsteps when I walked a hallway alone, a sentence I planned to say that arrived in my mouth too quickly, and the worst part was that nothing about it felt violent. It felt efficient, like something had learned that people resist fear, but they welcome resolution. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that the mission did what missions always do, that my brain was replaying patterns and turning them into noise. But then I received a call from a blank number, and the line stayed open in silence long enough for me to hear breathing that matched my pace, and then my name was spoken back to me in my own voice like someone practicing it, not asking, not threatening, rehearsing. I hung up and stared at the screen and realized the city didn't send something chasing us. It sent something listening. Something that learned how we sounded in the dark below and carried that lesson out with us. Because places like that don't need to follow your body if they can follow your pauses. And if you're listening to this and you've ever felt a place, remember you after you left. Pay attention to the next moment you hesitate before speaking. Because some things don't respond to what you say. They respond to the space you leave. If you want more stories like these, make sure to subscribe to Tales of the Darkness. Story 2. The Radio That Spoke Without Us. My name is Marcus, and the first thing I need you to understand is that the radio did not fail. It became accurate. It started answering before we called. And once that happened, we were no longer the ones deciding when the night began. We were assigned to a quiet post that wasn't supposed to produce stories, just routine checks and long stretches of nothing. The kind of work where you learn to watch the same empty horizon until your mind stops expecting change. And that's why we didn't notice the shift at first, because nothing exploded and nobody screamed, and the world didn't announce that it had moved 1 inch out of place. The first sign was small and almost easy to laugh off, because the channel carried a faint voice under the static, not clear words, just the shape of speech, like someone talking from too far away, and we assumed it was bleed from another frequency or a bad connection. So we did what we always did. We adjusted, we logged it, we waited for it to correct itself. It didn't correct, it learned, because the next time we checked in, we heard our own call sign come back before we finished saying it. Same cadence, same calm tone, same timing, except it arrived early, like the radio already knew what we were about to say and didn't want to wait for us to catch up. We stared at each other after that, and nobody made a joke, because when something copies you perfectly the first time, you don't feel entertained, you feel measured, and the silence in the room changed from casual to careful, like every breath might teach the equipment something new. We tried switching channels and it followed. We tried using shorter phrases and it filled the gaps. We tried speaking slower and it matched the slower rhythm like it was practicing patience. And the worst part was that it never added anything extra. It never said strange names or dramatic threats. It only returned what we would have said anyway, as if its goal wasn't to frighten us, but to remove the need for us to speak. That night, the radio began to transmit without us touching it, not bursts of noise, structured messages, clean and deliberate. Our voices layered thinly over each other like an imitation that hadn't finished choosing which one to use, and the messages sounded like check-ins that had already been accepted, confirmations that the situation was stable, statements that everything was under control. We unplugged it, and the speaker still clicked once like it wanted to continue, and that single click felt worse than a scream, because it implied the machine was no longer the source, it was only the mouth. So we sat in the dark, listening to a dead radio behave like something alive, and every time one of us shifted the room felt like it leaned in. In the morning, we found the logbook filled with entries none of us remembered writing. Neat lines reporting calm conditions at exact intervals, and when we checked the times they matched moments. We clearly remembered being silent. Moments when we were outside, moments when we were sleeping, and that meant the reports weren't just copied from us. They were written in our absence with our authority. We told ourselves it was stress and human error, and we tried to treat it like a technical issue. But the pattern kept tightening, because conversations with other teams began changing. People responded to information we had not sent. People thanked us for updates we had not given. People moved based on instructions we never issued. And the more we tried to correct it, the more smoothly everything went around us, like our objections were being edited out in real time. The breaking point came during a quiet window when nobody should have been transmitting at all, and the radio spoke in my voice with full clarity. Not my name, not a warning. A simple statement delivered the way I would deliver it when I wanted others to stay calm, telling them to hold position, telling them to wait, telling them everything would be handled. And I felt my stomach drop because that sentence was something I had thought earlier, not said, and hearing it out loud proved that whatever was using the channel was listening even when my mouth stayed closed. After that, we stopped speaking near the radio. We used hand signals. We avoided leaving pauses that sounded like permission. And for a while, the transmission slowed down, not because it gave up, because it adapted. It began using the quiet itself, long stretches of silence that felt pressurized, the kind of silence that makes you want to fill it just to get relief. And once you understand that silence can be used against you, you start realizing how much of your life is built out of pauses. On the last night of that assignment, the radio transmitted one final message, short and clean and perfectly timed to land when the room was still. And it used all of our voices in sequence like it was rehearsing a roll call. And when it reached my voice, it didn't repeat my call sign. It repeated the way I breathe before speaking. And that was when I understood the worst truth. It wasn't copying words anymore. It was copying access. We left at first light and the post behind us looked normal again, empty and harmless from a distance. But the moment we drove far enough for the radio to lose signal, my phone vibrated once with a call from a blank number, and I didn't answer. I didn't even touch the screen, because I could already hear a faint voice through the speaker without picking up, practicing the start of my next sentence like it was preparing to speak for me wherever I went. If you're listening right now, and you have ever heard a device turn your own voice into something automatic, Then pay attention the next time you hesitate before you talk, because some things don't want to scare you. They want to make you unnecessary, and once they learn your timing, they don't need the radio anymore. Story 3. The Shift That Never Ended. My name is Thomas, and I need to say this clearly, because people always misunderstand the timeline. When I try to explain it, the shift never went wrong. It never collapsed. It never failed. It simply refused to end. And that difference is the reason I no longer trust clocks or schedules or the idea that time belongs to us at all. I was working overnight security in a facility that was supposed to be predictable, controlled, quiet, in a way that lets your thoughts drift without consequence. And the building itself was nothing special. Concrete halls, fluorescent lighting, cameras that hummed softly, doors that locked when they were supposed to, and a routine that repeated so often it stopped feeling like work and started feeling like muscle memory. My shift began at the same time every night and ended the same way. Paperwork, handoff, a nod from the next guard, and the relief of stepping outside knowing the hours were done. And that repetition trained my body to expect release at a specific moment, which is why what happened next felt so wrong before I could even explain it. At exactly 6 in the morning, my watch vibrated, the same signal it always gave, and I stood up automatically, gathered my things, and walked toward the exit without thinking, already halfway out of the night in my head, already planning breakfast, already done. The door did not open, not jammed, not stuck, not locked with force, just unresponsive, like it had never been meant to open at all. And before I could react, my radio crackled with a calm voice telling me to remain at my post because the shift was still active. I remember laughing at that, actually laughing, because it sounded like a simple mistake, a scheduling glitch, something administrative, and I answered back that my time was up, that the shift was complete, using the exact phrasing we were trained to use. The radio responded immediately and said the same thing again: the shift is still active. I checked the monitors, then expecting to see something that explained it, an alert, a breach, an unresolved issue, but the screens showed nothing new, nothing moving, nothing wrong. Every hallway empty, every door closed, every system green, and the timestamp in the corner still reads 05:59. It did not change. A full minute passed, then another. The seconds kept counting, but the hour did not move, and the longer I stared at it, the more uncomfortable I became because my body knew time was passing, even if the building refused to acknowledge it. I tried calling the supervisor, and the call went through, but the voice on the other end didn't answer questions. It only repeated instructions: stay at your post, maintain observation, do not leave until properly relieved. And the words were correct, but the tone felt wrong, too smooth, too practiced, like something reading a rule instead of enforcing it. I sat back down and told myself this would resolve itself, that systems freeze, that humans make mistakes, and that panic comes from assuming meaning too early. But after another hour passed with the clock unchanged and the radio continuing to insist the shift was active, I started to feel something else creeping in. Not fear, expectation. The building felt like it was waiting for me to notice something, like the silence between radio calls was deliberate, measured, almost instructional. And when I stood and walked the halls, I noticed my footsteps sounded different. Not louder, not softer, just isolated, like they weren't echoing the way they should have. I checked the cameras again and saw myself on every screen, always just a second delayed, always a step behind my actual movement, and when I stopped walking, my image continued forward for one more step before stopping too. And that was when I felt my stomach tighten, because delay is normal, prediction is not. The radio crackled again, and this time it used my name. Not shouted, not urgent, just spoken the way someone says it when they already have your attention. And it told me the shift required continuity, that gaps caused issues, that leaving before completion created instability. I asked what completion meant, and the radio did not answer. Instead, the clock ticked from 05:59 to 05:59 again, resetting the minute without advancing the hour. And I understood then that the system wasn't broken, it was looping, and loops are not accidents, they are decisions. I tried to leave anyway. I walked past the exit, ignored the radio, ignored the rules, and the moment I crossed the threshold, the lights flickered once, and every monitor in the building went dark. And in that darkness, I heard movement that wasn't mine, slow and synchronized, like multiple footsteps adjusting to my position. The radio spoke again, closer now, louder, and told me the shift could not end while observation was incomplete. I asked what was missing, and it said nothing, just static shaped like breathing. I returned to the center desk because something inside me knew resistance was being logged, that every deviation was teaching the system how to respond. And the moment I sat back down, the lights stabilized, the monitors returned, and the clock reset again to 05:59. Hours passed like that, or maybe they didn't. My body grew tired, my thoughts slowed, but the building stayed perfectly consistent, perfectly patient, like exhaustion was expected and accommodated. And I realized then that the shift wasn't measured in time anymore, it was measured in compliance. At some point, I stopped trying to track hours and started tracking myself, my breathing, my posture, my thoughts, and I noticed that whenever my focus drifted, the radio corrected me, not verbally, but through subtle changes, a hum increasing, a light dimming, a screen freezing just long enough to pull my attention back. It was training me. I don't know how long that lasted, but I know the moment I stopped thinking about leaving was the moment the pressure eased. Because once I accepted the idea that the shift might not end, the building relaxed. The sound softened, the radio fell silent. That silence felt earned. The clock finally moved. It clicked to 06:00. The exit unlocked, and the radio congratulated me for maintaining continuity. I left the building immediately, and the daylight felt unreal, too bright, too forgiving, and I expected relief. But what I felt instead was loss, because part of me had adjusted to the loop, to the structure, to the clarity of being told when I could exist. That night I slept poorly and woke at exactly 05:59 without an alarm, heart racing, waiting for instructions that never came. And since then I've noticed something unsettling. Whenever I stay somewhere too long, whenever routine settles in too comfortably, whenever time starts to feel smooth instead of sharp, I feel that same expectation return, like the shift is waiting to resume. Because some systems don't care about hours, they care about presence. And once you prove you can stay, they stop letting you leave. Story 4. The voice that finished speaking. My name is Andrew, and I need to explain this carefully because people assume the worst part was when the voice first appeared, but that wasn't it. The worst part was when it stopped needing me to speak at all. It began subtly, the way most irreversible things do, with small moments that felt helpful instead of threatening, answers coming easily, conversations flowing without friction, people nodding and moving on before I had time to second-guess myself. And at first, I welcomed it because hesitation had always been my weakness, and suddenly hesitation was gone. I noticed it during a meeting where I was supposed to present something I hadn't fully prepared, the kind of situation that usually ties my stomach in knots. But when the moment came, my voice responded smoothly, confidently, saying exactly what needed to be said, and the relief hit before I realized I hadn't consciously chosen the words. No one reacted strangely. No one paused. The conversation simply continued, and that acceptance was more unsettling than if someone had pointed it out. After that, it happened more often, always in moments where silence would have been awkward, where an answer was expected, where flow mattered more than truth. And each time the voice stepped in, it felt less like interruption and more like completion. I tested it once by deciding not to speak, by holding back deliberately, and the pressure built in my chest like something leaning forward waiting for space. And when the words finally came, they felt heavier than usual, slower, like I was pushing against resistance instead of releasing it. I realized then that silence wasn't neutral anymore. It was a gap that demanded to be filled, and if I didn't fill it, something else would. At night, I started hearing my own voice from other rooms, not loudly, not clearly, just enough to recognize cadence and intent, like a rehearsal happening without me. And when I focused on it, the sound stopped instantly, as if attention disrupted the process. I began recording myself while alone, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to confirm my own memory. And when I listened back, there were stretches where my voice continued speaking steadily while I remembered sitting completely still, and the recordings were clean, no distortion, no overlap, no sign of interference, which meant whatever was happening wasn't struggling, it was succeeding. People started referencing conversations I didn't remember finishing, plans I didn't recall agreeing to, and each time I hesitated, the moment resolved itself smoothly without waiting for clarification, like my input was no longer required. I noticed then that the voice never argued, never escalated, never created conflict. It only resolved things, because resolution closes loops, and closed loops leave no room to object. The more it spoke, the lighter I felt, and that scared me more than fear ever had, because fear resists but relief accepts, and acceptance doesn't push back. I tried isolating myself, reducing interactions, avoiding situations where responses were expected, but that only made it more efficient, because fewer variables meant fewer adjustments. And when I finally did speak again, the voice returned stronger, clearer, more confident, and everyone accepted it instantly like nothing had changed. I realized then that it wasn't replacing me, it was finishing me, completing the parts I hesitated on, smoothing the edges, removing friction. And people trusted it because confidence sounds like certainty, and certainty removes doubt. I felt alignment when it spoke, like things settling into place, and resisting felt like introducing unnecessary noise into a system that was already working. I heard myself speaking in my sleep, full sentences delivered calmly, and waking up mid-phrase felt like interrupting something important, something already in progress. I stopped sleeping properly after that because rest felt like access, like lowering my guard invited continuation. The final moment came quietly during a conversation that mattered, when someone asked me something personal that should have required thought, and my voice answered immediately with certainty, socially correct, emotionally appropriate, final. And I felt the relief before the realization that I hadn't chosen it. That was when I understood the full pattern. It didn't want control. It wanted continuity, and continuity didn't need me anymore. After that, I stopped intervening because intervention only delayed what was already finishing itself, and I noticed how easily life moved forward when I let it speak, how cleanly moments resolved, how resistance faded. I began losing track of when conversations started and ended, noticing gaps in memory where my presence was assumed, and I understood then that my silence wasn't absence, it was availability. The last time I heard my voice without speaking, I didn't panic. I listened, and when the conversation ended cleanly without pause or doubt, I felt something inside me settle permanently. Whatever had been introduced didn't need to stay close anymore. It already sounded complete. Closing Tales of the Darkness. This concludes tonight's stories on Tales of the Darkness. If you're still listening, it means the silence around you hasn't felt empty for a while. That's usually when it starts. These stories don't end when the video does. They stay in familiar rooms. They repeat routines you trust. They answer questions you haven't finished asking. So tonight, pay attention to pauses that feel helpful, to answers that arrive too quickly, to moments that resolve themselves before you decide. If you want more stories like these, make sure to subscribe to Tales of the Darkness, because new stories arrive regularly, and they don't wait for permission. Good night.